Welcome to Blessed Be the Breakdown, the podcast where I was dissecting The Handmaid's Tale episode by episode, but now we have the Testaments, so I will be going over the first 3 episodes that premiered this week. So, this episode is going to be full of spoilers for the first 3 episodes. If you haven't watched, I'd recommend going to watch and then coming back. Let's get into it. Before, on my podcast, I was doing more deep dives of episodes, kind of going through undertones and things that this show was kind of trying to convey. For this new series, The Testaments, I'm going to be keeping it to more of like an opinionated, my thoughts on each episode. I just don't feel like right now, because the show is so new, I would be able to fully get into like an analysis of it yet. Maybe I'll come back and do that later. So we had 3 new episodes this week: Precious Flowers, Perfect Teeth, and Daisy. I loved this show, and I was really surprised at how much I liked it. So when we first were hearing about the show, at least I was, they were talking about it as it was going to be like a young adult, like teeny show sort of. And after watching like the first 5 minutes of the first episode, that is not what it was. It's still very much Gilead, so it still had that feel of The Handmaid's Tale, but with a completely new cast, sort of. One thing that I really wanted to point out to you is like them putting the text up there about Gilead, because when they were doing interviews, the showrunners and producers were basically saying that this show is going to be for people who have and have not watched The Handmaid's Tale. So I think that's why they put that in there. So I thought that was really interesting and cool, like just to give a little backstory about Gilead. Another thing that I really liked is right off the bat, we get June, right in that opening when the text is going up, when they have the Mayday radio playing. We can hear June's voice in the background. That was just like another just nice touch that kept us tied to The Handmaid's Tale without making it like too prevalent. We can already see that the show in itself is a lot lighter, just like cinematography wise. The Handmaid's Tale was very dark. Towards the end of The Handmaid's Tale, we got that lighter feel, and that's kind of what we're getting here. We get Agnes talking first, and in the books, if you've read the Testament book, it's actually Aunt Lydia who leads the first, I guess, chapter or first voiceover. So that's one thing that really stuck out to me as being different than, of course, from the book, which we already knew they were going to deviate from. And we now have confirmation pretty much that Daisy is not Nicole. I knew that. I mean, there's just no way she was going to be Nicole. But I still saw people online saying, oh, she could be Nicole. And I'm like, guys, come on. The timeline just would not match up. And sure enough, she's not. But I really loved, and I'm going to kind of like just give my overall thoughts. So I'm going to be jumping back and forth. At the end of episode 1, when we see June, like I just knew from seeing the back of her head, I was like, that's June. Sure enough, she turns around and there's June. I really love that they, of course, once again, did not make this show about her, but they kind of still incorporated her in there. So we're not just completely cut off from that part of the world. And if you've read the Testaments book, you know who Ada is. Okay. Now, Ada is this woman who helps Daisy in the book after her family has been killed. Ada is the one who introduces her to Mayday, tells her like everything about her life before, and tells her about how she was baby Nicole and all this other stuff. So June kind of took that place. Of course, her name's not Ada in the show because she's June, but I noticed that right at the end of episode 1, and I thought that was a really cool way to keep ties. So now we already have June, who's met Daisy who's going in meeting with Hannah or Agnes. So that's how they're going to tie it together. And I thought that was really smart, because I was truly wondering how they were going to get Daisy and Agnes connected, other than them just being together in the world of Gilead and at school together. And I thought that was a really smart way to do it. I already cannot stand Shunammite, and Paula. She really just pisses me off. I read the book. Once again, I'm going to keep referencing that book, at least for this first episode. But that'll probably fade off because, like I said, this is going to be such a deviation from the book. But I already knew Shunammite was going to be just a B, and Paula, because of the way they're written in the book. And sure enough, Rowan Blanchard, I think that's her name, she just plays that so well, just from her just looking, right? Like, she's such a good actor when it comes to just like looking facial expression acting and carrying that across the screen. I thought that was really cool. That's something Elizabeth Moss did a lot in The Handmaid's Tale. She was really good with acting with her face. What I did like, especially with Agnes in the scenes we got with her and Paula, was that when she was talking back without actually talking back. She was just kind of like appeasing Paula, but doing it in a snarky way. I loved that because that really carried through like something that June would do and how June would talk. Just the way she's talking, I feel like that kind of took part of that as well. Like you can kind of hear June through Hannah, even though Hannah was not raised by June. Since we're on the topic of Agnes, I want to go ahead and talk about the flashback she gets when Paula gives her Tabitha's gift for her becoming a woman or getting her period. And we get that flashback. And if you didn't know, that actor who plays Mrs. Mackenzie in The Handmaid's Tale is actually Bradley Whitford's wife, who is Commander Lawrence. So just a fun fact there if you didn't know that. But I like, once again, that we kind of got a tie back to The Handmaid's Tale. So it kind of like puts the pieces together so that way going forward we can have a clean slate with this new show. We get a glimpse of Agnes being an actual teenage girl when she's getting on the bus and she sees the guard, and they kind of like make that look at each other like kind of flirty. And of course we know what happens to that poor guy later on in the episode, which I'll touch on here in a second. But we just really get thrown into the world of like, hey, this is a teenager still, right? Like she still has like teenage things going on. She's never experienced these things that normal teenagers would experience. And I thought when her and Rosa were talking and Rosa mentioned Tinder, that was just so funny and such a good like tie-in. And that's one thing I think they did at the end of The Handmaid's Tale, is they kind of brought in some humor, and they're doing that here as well. And I think that really fits for the show, especially because it's still serious, but not as serious as The Handmaid's Tale. I mean, we did get, of course, they take the girls to see the men hanging. So it's still very much The Handmaid's Tale world. Oh, and also, one of the Marthas in Agnes's house doesn't have a tongue. So that's just another thing. And they're like, hey, yeah, this is like kind of lighter, but it's still very, very much Gilead. And they're still terrible people here. And then we get into Hannah meeting Daisy at the school. And if you don't know, so there's Pearl Girls and then there's Pearls. Pearl Girls are like missionaries, essentially. They go into Canada, they try and recruit these girls to come back and be Pearls to hopefully eventually go through wives school and become wives. And that is where we meet Daisy. Daisy has come in and been brought in by Pearl Girls, and she is now put together by Aunt Lydia, who we see her statue when you first walk in the school. And once again, if you've read the book, you know that was a big thing. And why they're putting fruit on there, I'm not sure if they'll touch on that, but I don't see how they cannot when it comes to Aunt Lydia's point of view and talking, because we didn't get a lot from Aunt Lydia this episode, or these 3 episodes. So I think her stories will be more prevalent in the other episodes further on down the line, and we'll kind of get more of a backstory for that. But going back to Daisy and Agnes, she puts them together, and we see them bond kind of quickly, and it's especially prevalent when that guy, the guy that Agnes saw on the bus, one of the guards, actually gets taken in and punished in front of these girls. He has his hand completely just taken off. And we really see how like stunted these girls are emotionally to that stuff from growing up in Gilead, when Daisy has this look of complete shock on her face because she is not from that world, right? And then the rest of the girls are like yelling and cheering it on. And that just was such a good contrast to show us like, oh my gosh, like this is what these girls are used to growing up in Gilead, which makes total sense. But I think we really needed to see that, especially with Daisy. But my point to that was Daisy runs out. Agnes goes and essentially tries to take care of her, help her. And she's like, hey, after Daisy cusses or whatever, says God's name in vain, she's like, hey, this can be our secret, right? Like, we don't have to tell him. And as we know, she ends up telling on herself anyways and kind of stabbing Agnes in the back. And then they both get punished, which is very the soap in the mouth, like, oh my gosh, like, that had to suck. But this is, I think, something that kind of really draws them together too, because they're like, okay, we're going through this stuff, right? And we clearly see not just Agnes, but the other girls have not had obviously the same experiences that Daisy's had. We see that when the bus had just gotten attacked and Daisy was talking about the beach and men having hair on their backs and hair on their chests and stuff, and the other girls were just shocked as to how she knew that. Another thing I love about Daisy is even though she's there and she knows she has to kind of play this part because she is, a part of Mayday now, that she doesn't stop herself from saying things like that are completely shocking to these women, these girls who have been in there for their whole lives and know nothing better. We also see a little bit of a rivalry, I guess, when Garth comes into the picture. And I wouldn't even call it a rivalry right now. It's more of like, you can tell that's probably going to be a part of the story in the future, that Agnes kind of seems to like Garth as well. And Daisy, of course, seems to also like Garth. Once again, if you've read the book, you kind of have a backstory to that. I don't know how they're going to play it in here, but that's kind of what it's hinting at to me. And Garth is the last guard that was on the bus when they got shot out. Kind of jumping back and forth here, but I did want to point out that the handmaid doll is missing, as we all saw. And in the book, it was because these girls are taught to kind of fear handmaids. Handmaids, as we know, are seen as less, and these kids were taught that. So she was scared of the handmaid's doll. That's why she got rid of it in the book. That's just a little backstory to that. And then, too, at the end of episode 1, I think it was, when Daisy had become a woman or got her period, and we see her, get woken up by Aunt Lydia, taken to get essentially baptized, and they held her under there for a very long time. I'm like, is that normal? They usually hold you under there that long? I don't know, but that was an excessive amount of time. Like, she clearly looked like she was struggling. But one key thing I wanted to point out too is Becca, I think that's her name, is clearly not happy with the fact that she is green and about to be a wife. She's clearly scared, and I think, once again, I've read the book. Sorry to keep mentioning that, but I think that's why I have these opinions and kind of know, because I kind of already know it's supposed to happen. So yeah, she's clearly scared and didn't want Agnes to go through that too, as we saw. She was like, I didn't want you to be here with me because I didn't want you to have to go through this. And that's scary. Like, after Daisy goes to the dentist, who is a complete pedo, she sort of realizes, like, these older men are going to be trying to get with her now to be their wives. Like when they go to Commander Judd's house to visit their friend because she's married to him. And I mean, he's just so much older than her. And we know that happens in this world. And it's just crazy to see these young girls at this period of their lives having to go through that, and how scared they are, and all of this new stuff being thrown at them. Another thing I think everybody knows, but like, Becca's dad is the dentist. So imagine living with a guy like that, even after all of these other horrible people are in Gilead, but like, that being your dad is just crazy. Speaking of dads, when they're all sitting at the table and Shaunamite makes the comment like about her boobs and saying that her dad said that's the best asset for her. I can't remember what she says, but I just thought that was so weird. Like, who says that to their daughter? But once again, we are in Gilead, so normal etiquette between, I guess, families is not normal. So maybe he thought that was okay to say, but that's just so gross to me. We get the signature Gilead shame circle, so I'm going to kind of circle back to Daisy throwing Agnes under the bus. But we've seen it many times in the Handmaid's Tale world, Gilead world, that they sit in this circle and they blame the person for whatever they've done. And this time we see Daisy in the middle, and Agnes is, of course, a part of that, and she throws her under the bus when she gets in her face. And I just thought that was their way of, like, kind of, once again, they're sprinkling these things in here to remind us that, like, yes, these are teenage girls, but they've had to endure everything that these other people have already gone through in the Handmaid's Tale world that we've seen. And I don't know, man. Imagine being so young like that and being brought up that way. I guess at that point it would become normal, but it's still just so weird to me and just so sad for those girls. And then in episode 3, we get mostly Daisy's story, and we get a lot of June or Elizabeth Moss. And there was one point at the end where they're in the diner, and June kind of looks at her like, gives her like a motherly look, and I think that's coming from a place of realizing that her daughters are out there, and that's probably what like Nicole, because once again Daisy is not Nicole, is out there living with some other family right now. And I think that look was that her saying that like she understands, and she has this like motherly instinct to her, especially over Daisy, especially because she's heard so much about Daisy from her parents. Since episode 3 was just very all about Daisy, we get a lot of her backstory in regards to her life, her personal life before this happened. Her parents were shop owners. Her parents were, very loving people. We see her and her mom. I can't remember if it's in this episode or the first one. It's this one. But her and her mom, they're being visited by Pearl Girls, and they give them honey and pamphlets, and her mom's just being nice to them. We see she has a boyfriend. She smokes pot, right? Like, she's a very normal teenager. She's leading this very normal life. And after, shit hits the fan and her parents get killed, June gets her at the police station, kind of like tells her what's going on, tells her she's adopted, that those weren't her real parents, which I guess that makes sense. I feel like, I could be wrong, but I feel like in the book, and that's why it's probably throwing me off a little bit, I think in the book she knows that she's adopted, but I could be wrong about that. But anyways, so June breaks the news to her like, hey, these are not your parents. Well, they are, but they're not they're adoptive parents. You get what I'm saying? But they go over that, and she's kind of like taking it all in. And then we get the part where she mentions that Gilead doesn't want to kill her. They just want her back. That they've been looking for her, and that she is basically viewed as like Gilead's. Like, they want her back. And so I am still wondering who she will be, because she's not going to be Angela. She's not going to be Nicole. So who is she? I'm guessing somebody from Angel's Flight is how it's going to play out. One of the kids. But who knows? She does. Lucy Halliday, I think that's how you say her name, looks so much like June. It's crazy. Like, when they're sitting there across the diner table, I was just like, if they had gone the route of, Nicole being Daisy, that would have worked so well, because they look so much alike to me. Like, even the facial shape. It was crazy. I was like, ugh. But once again, I know that that's not going to happen just because of timeline. I think that was all of the like key points from this episode, or the first 3 episodes. I really liked it. I cannot wait to see where this is going to move going forward. And I was really scared about this show and how they were going to play it out. But I'm honestly really shocked about how well they've merged it, and I should have known. But after the last season of The Handmaid's Tale, which I liked, okay, but I know there was a lot of controversy about like the writing and stuff, so it did maybe make me a little skeptical coming into this and seeing how they were going to play it out. But so far, I really love it. I like the direction they're going. I'm excited to see more of it, and I can't wait to see like where we go from here. We still have to get Aunt Lydia's backstory, so we'll be hearing a lot from her. I also really love how they're doing the voiceovers, because I never realized how much of The Handmaid's Tale was June kind of speaking in her mind, because she couldn't actually talk, right? Or she could, but like not as openly as you normally would be able to. And hearing that once again, like Agnes talking like that, or Daisy, it just works really well, especially with how the Testaments was written, where you have the 3 narrators, Daisy, Agnes, and then Aunt Lydia. I really am excited to see Aunt Lydia's backstory played out in real life, but I have a feeling, I don't know if we'll get that in this season. Like, if they're gonna play it out in the long run, I don't know if they'll kind of do it like they did The Handmaid's Tale, where the first book was the first season, and then go from there. I don't think they could necessarily do that because of how the book ends, but I think it would be nice to see Aunt Lydia's story this season. because I'm just very interested to see that. So my predictions for the future episodes, I think Garth is definitely going to be a problem for Daisy and Nicole. Maybe not like an all-out fight, but they are teenage girls, so that's going to come into play for sure. I'm not sure if we'll see any more of June. I think this was kind of her like transition out of here. Maybe if they have, more seasons, we'll see her again at some point, especially at the end. I won't, well, actually, you know what? No, I'm not going to ruin it. I was going to say what happens at the end of the book. I'm not going to ruin it, but if they get to that point, I think June will have to come back because she is a part of that story. One thing I forgot to just kind of touch on is like how tough Daisy was, though. Like, imagine losing your parents in such a horrific way, not really having time to process, then finding out they weren't really your parents, and then being thrown into the Gilead world, right? Like, that has to be so crazy to have to go through. And like, she's just so tough for doing that, because like we even see her when the bus is getting attacked and shot at, like she kind of pulls Agnes down and kind of shields her, saves her from the bullets. So I just wanted to touch on that before I wrap this up. Going forward, my episodes are going to be probably a little shorter just because I'm doing more opinionated type things rather than full-on analysis. I think my plan right now is going to be just to continue doing some stuff like this where I just kind of go over what I thought about the episodes, and maybe something else will come up in the future. Let me know if you like me comparing things to the book or not, because if not, I'll totally stop doing that, because I feel like that can definitely give away some spoilers, so I don't want to do that. I am going to stop doing the real world parallels that I was doing with my last episodes when I was covering The Handmaid's Tale, because I don't feel like they're as prevalent or to this particular show, not to the real world, because we know what's going on in our world right now is not great. But I kind of want to use this more as an escape and kind of just to talk about the show and go over that. So I'm going to be leaving out the real world parallels for now. If there's anything else you would like to hear, let me know, and I can try and incorporate it in here. Feel free to follow me on social media. I have TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. For the first time, I don't think I mentioned this in the beginning, but I'm actually going to be doing video podcasts. I'll have an accompanying video with this, and it's just me sitting in front of the camera talking. I'll probably pop in some pictures though, so it may be cool to check out if you want to check that out. I will be posting some clips on social media too, just some teaser clips. So yeah, give me a follow. It's at Blessed Be the Breakdown. All of my links are in the descriptions. And you can find me, like I said, Blessed Be the Breakdown on any of those socials. At the end of The Handmaid's Tale season 6, they gave out shirts, Hulu did, and I framed mine. So if you want to see it, you can go to the YouTube video and see it. But it does say the saying that June says in the show, which I thought was cool that she said to Daisy in the scene where they're in the diner. Don't let the bastards grind you down. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up now. I hope you guys have a great week. Can't wait to come back next week and go over the next episodes. As always, blessed be the fight.